The day I realized my son had taken my husband's inheritance from me, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a biscuit tin of receipts, an old check register. The inheritance was supposed to keep me safe. Roof, Medicare gaps, maybe a little road trip to see the Smokies. Until I saw transfers I did not make. Tyler told me he needed the money more than I did. He said, "It's what Dad would have wanted." Then it vanished into the carpeted maw of Hollywood Casino Columbus. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and click the bell. We have new stories every day. Like and comment which city you're watching from. My name is Marianne Walker. I'm 66, a church alto who reads the obits over black coffee and keeps my social security statements in a green binder under the quilt my mother pieced. I live in Westerville, Ohio. My husband Frank passed on January 5th, 2024. Frank's mother left him her farm in Knox County years back. When his sister decided she couldn't keep it, they sold it, and Frank told me, patting the side of the envelope with the closing papers, "This is so you don't have to worry." After probate and all those letters with our name spelled 3 different ways, the proceeds, $312,000, hit our joint savings at Hawthorne Community Bank on March 1st. I kept it there, dull, on purpose. I made a list. New roof, $14,600, estimate already in the drawer. Dentist work I'd been putting off. A little cushion for when my knees give out and I finally schedule that surgery. Tyler, our only child, is 34. He's got his father's height and my habit of biting his lip when he's thinking. He also has an appetite for the big play, the sure thing, the shiny shortcut. Before his dad passed, Tyler had floated a quick turnaround trucking venture. Frank told him to show a business plan. Tyler showed us a glossy brochure he made on Canva. I hugged him and said we'd think. Frank died, and "will think" turned into absolutely not because grief and large sums don't mix. On May 9th, a Thursday, I logged into Hawthorne to pay the gas bill and saw a wire, $40,000 to Franklin Ridge Logistics, LLC. The name was unfamiliar. The memo line was blank. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a stare in the dark. I called the bank. Hold music. After 8 minutes, a woman named Casey told me the wire was initiated in branch that morning with a notarized durable power of attorney presented by my agent, one Tyler Walker. My mouth went dry. I said, "My agent?" She said, "A durable power of attorney gives him authority." He presented ID. She said it calm, like she was telling me the weather. I texted Tyler, "Did you move money?" He called immediately. "Mom, I helped you. You don't get how banks fee you to death. I'm consolidating. We're avoiding probate craziness." I kept my voice even. "Your father's estate is already closed. There is no probate, and this account is mine." He pivoted. "Fine, well, tax angles. I know a guy. I had to act fast." By noon, I was in a cardigan, even though it was 78 degrees, driving to the Hawthorne branch on State Street with my green binder and Frank's death certificate. Casey brought the ranch manager, a man with a tie patterned with tiny golf flags. He pulled a copy of the document they'd relied on: durable financial power of attorney, Marianne Walker, principal, Tyler Walker, agent. My name, my address, my birth date, all correct. It had 2 witness signatures I didn't recognize, and a notary stamp. Amber DeLuca Notary, Public Franklin County, commission expires 10/15/2027. The date under the notary's line said March 23rd, 2024, 2:10 p.m. "Frank died January 5th, I said softly, more to myself than to him. "This isn't his POA, the manager said, polite confused. "It's yours. It makes your son your agent." I shook my head. "I never signed this." He looked at the signature, the loopy M and the W that looked reasonable if you didn't know me. I know my own loops. There's a hitch in my W from a childhood break I got in my wrist falling off my cousin's hay bale. The signature on the paper had no hitch. "I need a copy," I said. He gave me one and a pamphlet on disputing transactions. I signed an affidavit stating the wire was unauthorized. They gave me a case number, FRA-24-5519, and said the fraud unit would review, but because it was my son and the document said he could act for me, it could take time. The manager used that voice people use with widows. I nodded and walked out, the copy warm in my hands. I sat in my car and read the notary stamp again. My eyes caught on the tiny numbers etched faintly around the seal, her commission number. I went home and called the number printed under her name, figuring I'd leave a message she'd never return. She picked up on the second ring. She said, "This is Amber. I'm a notary." I told her my name, what I had in my hand. Silence stretched. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "on March 23rd, I was at my niece's baby shower from noon to 5 at the Vintage Carriage House in Dublin. I have 50 photos of me in a sash that says Fun Aunt and a cupcake stand on my dress to prove it. I didn't notarize anything for Marion Walker. She asked me to text a photo of the stamp. I did. She said, 'That's my stamp, but that's not my handwriting on the certificate block, and I never met you.' She told me she kept a journal, like notaries are supposed to. 'No entry for you, no thumbprint. If someone used my stamp, that's a crime.' I wrote 'baby shower' in block letters on a sticky note and pressed it to the copy. Then I combed through my emails. 3 more transfers had stacked up in the last week. 2 cashier's checks for $25,000 and $32,500, purchased in branch, a $19,000 cash withdrawal flagged agent. There were also 3 ATM withdrawals, $1,000 each, which made no sense because Hawthorne's limit is $500 unless special. Another note. I realized Tyler had likely walked in with that paper, smiled, and took what Frank and I had scrimped for 43 years. I called Adult Protective Services for Franklin County because I'd sat through a seminar at church about financial exploitation of older adults. A woman named Monica asked my age, then slowed her voice like a warm hand. I told her what I knew and what I feared. She gave me a case number and told me to file a police report too, even though it would feel like betraying my son. "You're not betraying him," she said. "You're telling the truth." That evening, I set the table for one and pretended comfort. Chicken thighs crisped in my cast iron, green beans, a small baked potato. I ate half and put it away because I knew I'd be awake at 3 wanting to chew something. I opened my receipt tin and slipped the bank's copy of the POA between old dentist receipts and last year's hymn schedule.
At 10:30, I drove over to Tyler's condo in Gahanna. His truck wasn't there. A neighbor kid was walking a French bulldog. "You just missed him," the kid said when I asked. "He left with a guy an hour ago. They were talking about a poker room." I told myself not to assume. I drove by Hollywood Casino anyway, tires whispering over 270, and there it was, lit up like a promise. I wanted to march in and find him under the chandeliers, but I am 66, and grief had already burned the soles of my feet this year. I went home, set my pill organizer, and watched the blue numbers on the microwave until midnight turned to 1. The next morning, Monica from APS called back to check on me. I told her about the notary. "That's good," she said. "Document everything. Don't confront him alone yet. Let's get the bank to talk to us." 15 minutes later, Hawthorne's fraud unit liaison, a woman named Jill with the kind of calm I suspect is practiced more than felt, scheduled a meeting at the regional office for Monday, May 13. On Saturday, I went to the county recorder's office. The clerk was a young man with a neck tattoo that disappeared under his collar. I asked if any documents, POAs, liens had been recorded in my name. He searched and found nothing. Recording a POA isn't required, but weird ones often show up here. I thanked him and wrote down the time I was there and his name. I pressed the copy of the forged POA between my palms until my knuckles went white. Sunday, I did what I always do, sang alto on Blessed Assurance, took coffee and styrofoam with the ladies who remember when our choir robes were scratchier, and nodded through small talk. After service, I cornered Ruth, who runs the church's quilting circle and reads legal thrillers like their devotionals. I told her a sliver of it, a family thing with the bank, and she squeezed my hand the way you hold on to someone on a patch of ice. On May 13, I wore my navy skirt, flats with good tread, and walked into the conference room where Jill from the bank sat with a man introduced as Regional Risk. I set my green binder down. "This is my file so far," I said. "Here are all transfers since March. Here is the copy of the power of attorney that bears a date when I was not present with a notary. Here is a voicemail from my son asking me to confirm to the bank that it was authorized, which I never did." I slid them a printout. Tyler's text, time-stamped 11:07 p.m. Saturday. "Mom, if a lady calls, just say yes. I'm cleaning up a mess I made, but it's to keep you safe." Jill's polite face twitched. "We'll need to verify a few items," she said. We have to be careful with family disputes, but the notary issue is significant. That night, I called the number under the power of attorney's notary seal again and asked Amber if she would write a statement about where she was on March 23rd. She sighed. "I already emailed the bank," she said. "I'm mad. Someone used my name on something that could hurt you." She sent me a copy. A clean paragraph, the baby shower location, the time-stamped photos, and a scanned page from her notary journal showing no entry for my name. By Tuesday, 2 more withdrawals posted. The bank had still not frozen the account. I swallowed bile and did what mothers do when scared. We cook and call our children. I invited Tyler to Sunday dinner. "Roast chicken?" he asked, boyish. "Your favorite," I said, "and lemon pie." I cleaned like calm was a place you could dust into existence. I set the table with the good plates and 2 cloth napkins, one with a tiny catch where it got snagged last Thanksgiving. When Tyler arrived, he kissed my cheek and sniffed the air, grinning. I tucked my phone under the folded napkins, microphone peaking. Ohio is a one-party consent state. I was one party, and my heart was beating hard enough to qualify me as 2. We ate. He talked about a property deal that had him driving to Cincinnati and back twice in a day. His eyes were bright and tired in a way that felt familiar from Frank's last month. After pie, I set my fork down and pushed my glasses up. "Tell me about the power of attorney," I said. He froze. "Mom," I held up a hand. "The one you used May 9th, the one notarized March 23rd at 2:10 in the afternoon." His face did a small thing like a drawer catching. "I had to put a date," he said eventually. "They wouldn't move the money without a date." My voice barely crested a whisper. "So you wrote one in." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Mom, listen, I needed seed money. Kelsey's hours dropped. There's this opportunity. The casino." He stopped. Then he said something I will remember as long as I can remember anything. "I needed it more than you. You'll be fine. You own this house." At 9:30 that night, after he left with a Tupperware container of lemon slices, like he was any son after Sunday dinner, I played the recording. It was clear. It was devastating. I emailed it to myself, then to Jill at the bank, then to Mr. Larkin, an attorney Ruth recommended for clean, quiet, pay attention work. The subject line was plain: unauthorized transactions, admission of forged notary date. On Wednesday morning, I parked outside Hollywood Casino in daylight, sat in my car, and wrote a letter to their compliance office. I had found an address online. I enclosed copies of the cashier's check withdrawals with the check numbers and asked them to preserve any and all records of transactions, surveillance, and player card activity for Tyler Walker, driver's license ending 4421, dates May 1 to June 15. I mailed it certified and kept the little green slip like it was a string tied around my finger to remember who I still was. Mr. Larkin sat me down Thursday with coffee that tasted like the bottom of a church urn. He said, "We are going to do this correctly. No pity, no rage, just paper." He drafted a preservation letter to the bank and the casino. He filed a police report with me, with the Columbus Division of Police Financial Crimes Unit. I told Monica from APS. She told me she'd note cooperating bank, possible forged notary, adult son, funds at risk. Friday, my neighbor Elaine knocked on my door. She's 72 and sees everything. She said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I saw Tyler's truck over by Georgeville Road 3 nights this week, late. The casino. And on Instagram, she showed me a story clip before it expired. Tyler smiling in low casino light, chips stacked like cakes. The caption, 'Turning it around.'" My hands went cold. I took a screenshot. The timestamp read, Tuesday, 1:14 a.m. By the 23rd of May, the total gone was $126,500. By June 3, it was $204,800. On June 10, I sat in my living room, heat pressing down like a hand, and watched the tiny line lace across my checking screen. Cashier's check, $42,000, Agent Tyler Walker. My roof estimate sat on the coffee table under a coaster. I clicked print on every page. Tapes, texts, bank memos. I numbered each one with a blue pen. I thought of Frank's steady way of tying rope before winter. I thought of the way grief makes you dizzy if you don't sit down. Stay till the end. I'll show the truth. On June 12, Jill called. Mrs. Walker, our preliminary review shows material irregularities with the notarization and the timeline. We're placing a hold on further withdrawals and escalating to our regional risk committee. In the meantime, please do not discuss the investigation with your son. I breathed for what felt like the first time in a week. That night, Tyler showed up unannounced, hot-faced and itching. "Mom, you froze the account. They called me. What are you doing?" He was searching my face for the woman who sewed on his scout patches. I found my voice. "Protecting what your father left me." He paced. He told me it was temporary, that the casino had markers and he needed to cover them, that once I climb out, this is just a story we'll laugh about. I asked him how much he owed. He said numbers like children say ages, with pride and no idea how large they are. 80, but I'm already down to 60. There's a poker guy who's going to stake me, and my stare stopped him. He looked so young, I could see first grade in his pupils. "Tyler," I said, "you forged a notary date and pretended to be me." He put his head in his hands and cried. Not pretty, not cinematic. I watched my son's shoulders shake and felt two readings of him inside me. The boy who used to count lightning seconds, and the man who lifted my house keys right out of my bowl. "I'll fix it," he said into his palms. "I promise." I put a box of tissues on the table and didn't touch him because love and enabling are separated by a very thin napkin, and I was done with thin. By June 20, the bank's hold had stalled further loss. Total at risk $246,500, according to Mr. Larkin's neat spreadsheet. The rest remained in my savings with a digital lock the bank set so no in-branch agent could transact. The police detective assigned, Sergeant Hahn, called to say he had my file, he'd heard from the notary, and he was waiting for the casino to respond to the preservation letter. "Casinos cooperate," he said. "They have compliance departments the size of small villages." On June 23, I received 2 envelopes. The first was from the bank, a formal letter saying they were reviewing whether the POA was valid on its face and whether the bank's reliance was commercially reasonable. The second was from the casino's compliance office acknowledging receipt of my certified letter and confirming they had frozen Tyler's player account pending review. 2 green slips tucked into my receipt tin, 2 thin straps across a wild thing. I did not sleep much that week. I took to quilting at the kitchen table at midnight, small stitches like breath. I sang to myself the alto line of hymns, quietly so as not to wake the dead left in my house. The hum of my refrigerator sounded like a country road in summer. In the morning, I watered my hydrangeas and pretended the blooms understood how close they'd been to being sold along with everything else. On June 30, Kelsey, my daughter-in-law, knocked with eyes that looked like she'd been crying for a month. "Please," she said, still in scrubs from an evening shift that was no longer full-time, "don't ruin us." She leaned her head against my doorframe. "I swear, I don't even know what a notarization journal is." I believed her. And also, I did not move my line. I'm not ruining anyone. I'm enforcing the truth. She nodded, defeated, and told me Tyler was sleeping during the day, out at night, and lying like a 6th grader. She said she'd found a crumpled marker slip from the casino in the laundry. "It says $15,000, she whispered, like it would disappear if she didn't pronounce all the numbers. What do we do? I told her she could come to church with me Sunday and sit next to me, even if the lights felt too bright. I told her to consider changing the login to their joint account, and then felt the shame roll through the room like heat because I was advising a girl to secure her life against my boy. It was the 4th of July by the time the bank called to schedule a resolution conference. I ironed a blouse in the heat and reminded myself this is just paper and people, not death. And then, in the way life insists on offending our sense of narrative, my roof started to leak during the fireworks. I caught the drips in a mason jar and thought of Frank. And then I sat at my table with Monica's APS intake notes, Mr. Larkin's filing copies, the notary statement with the baby shower, and the meeting invite stamped with bank letterhead. The pen in my hand weighed as much as a hammer. I was ready. I was scared,
And I was not alone. Not anymore, because I had every page I needed, numbered and true. The bank put it all on a table for me on July 8. The cashier's check copies with Tyler's signature, security footage stills, blurry but tall, the forged POA with a tidy paperclip, the intake notes where Jill had written, "Principal disputes execution, notarization timing impossible, agent is son." Beside me sat Mr. Larkin, whose suits always looked like he slept in them and then ironed them on the way to work, and across from us the regional risk man cleared his throat. He began, "We aren't here to assign blame," and I felt Mr. Larkin's coat tap against my shoe, a reminder, breathe. The bank said words like validation and recognizable authority and reasonable reliance. Mr. Larkin said, "Void ab initio," which made the risk man blink. Then Mr. Larkin laid down Amber DeLuca's statement, the page from her notary journal, and a timeline. March 23rd, 2:10 p.m. notary stamp. But Miss DeLuca was cutting a pink cake in Dublin when Miss Walker was at a pharmacy pickup in Westerville. Time-stamped receipt here. He slid the CVS receipt across the table like it was a playing card. And whether the POA were, which it is not, it would not authorize theft.
Jill's calm cracked into a small frown at the corner of her mouth. "We're opening a claim against the instruments processed under that POA," she said. "Cashier's checks, certainly. The wire, harder." Mr. Larkin nodded like he'd expected that. "We'll take your best on the instruments and continue separately on the conversion," he said. They offered coffee. I asked for water and realized my hands trembled just a little. I set them flat on the table, like we were about to pray. That afternoon, Sergeant Hahn called to say the casino had responded. "They froze his markers and flagged his account," he said. "They'll cooperate with the subpoena. They also sent me a copy of his player card win-loss statement from May and June. You want to hear the number?" I braced. $198,300 in net losses, not counting tips and cash outside the cage. He let that sit. "That's just tracked play," he added. I wrote the number on the back of an envelope and underlined it twice. "My son is not a villain," I told myself after we hung up. "He is a man who made terrible choices." Then I went and stood in my yard where the hydrangeas were so heavy with blossoms they bent, and I staked 2 of them with green ties. Keep watching. There will be justice. The casino's compliance office sent Mr. Larkin a letter confirming receipt of our subpoena request when it issued. They used words like preserved, recorded, and CCTV at cage number 3. They included a copy of the log where Tyler had presented cashier's checks drawn on Hawthorne Community Bank numbers 345918 and 345922 on May 17 and May 25, exchanged for chips. The log entry included the driver's license number and the last 4 of his social. I felt like puking at the clinical neatness of it. When I told Tyler I'd involved the police, he said a sentence that sealed the shape of the next year. "You'd call the cops on your own son?" His face was a storm I would have driven through for him when he was 10 and had a fever. "I will hold you to the truth," I said. He swore under his breath and slammed my door. The sound echoed in the kitchen where my cast iron pan hung on its hook, heavy and comforting. On July 20, a group gathered in my living room, as if for a family meeting, but the family in question was my bank statements. Monica from APS sat on my couch, Mr. Larkin took the chair near the window, and Elaine brought sweet tea like any Ohio aunt. We were building something, a structure made of dates and amounts and the way a signature swirls. We made lists, calls to the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, a separate complaint to the Secretary of State's Notary Commission regarding Amber's stolen stamp, a request to the bank for their notary stamp serial verification forms, and a referral to the county prosecutor's office from the police. I was the one with the voice that didn't shake when I said Tyler's name into official air. That surprised me. I thought I'd be the one breaking, but it turned out I had steel in places grief had burned clean. "We'll keep this civil if we can," Mr. Larkin said, "but we may file a civil theft and conversion claim alongside any criminal investigation to protect your interests. We'll seek a temporary restraining order to freeze whatever assets he has." On July 25, we filed. In Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, case number 24CV6130, Mary Ann Walker versus Tyler Walker, we alleged conversion, fraud, civil theft, and unjust enrichment. The complaint had no adjectives. It had numbers, a forged date, and a mother whose heart was beating in ink. The court granted a temporary restraining order that Friday, freezing Tyler's joint account with Kelsey up to the amount in dispute and forbidding disposition of non-exempt personal property, including his F-150 and a boat I didn't know he had until the sheriff taped a list to my door. The deputies were polite and almost apologetic, like the whole thing offended their sense of how sons and mothers should be. Tyler called. "Mom, please," he said, voice small. "They're taking everything." I felt a sick trickle of relief. It was real to him now. "They're preserving what your father left for me," I said. He hung up. Kelsey texted me a picture of a folded paper from Gamblers Anonymous with the meeting schedule circled. "He went," she wrote. "I don't know if he means it." I wrote back, "One step at a time." August thickened. The bank, under pressure from Mr. Larkin and the letter we sent to the Attorney General's office, offered a partial reimbursement. In a letter dated August 14, they acknowledged procedural deficiencies in processing the cashier's checks using a POA later called into question, and offered to credit my account $126,000 plus interest and fees. The wire to Franklin Ridge Logistics LLC and the cash withdrawals, they said, were outside the scope of their instrument's liability, but subject to ongoing investigation. Mr. Larkin squeezed my shoulder when I read the amount. He murmured, "Take it. It doesn't end the rest." On August 20, I sat in the AG's office waiting room in a sweater, because government buildings are always cold. A young attorney listened to my plain story, took copies of everything, and said they'd contact the bank about their POA procedures. She used words like pattern and compliance review, and I found that I could imagine, just barely, a future where this wouldn't happen to someone else's hydrangeas. September brought the casino's full compliance response to Mr. Larkin's subpoena. It came in a box with a chain of custody form on top. There were logs, surveillance stills of Tyler at the cage, timestamps, and a report listing $198,300 in tracked losses over 6 weeks, plus $24,000 in checks that bounced and were later covered by withdrawals from my account. The pictures were low resolution and cruel in their fidelity. My son at 9:14 a.m. on March 26, sliding a $25,000 cashier's check across a counter. My son at 1:07 a.m. on June 3, face shiny with sweat, chips in front of him like a farewell parade. In one printout, he was smiling at someone just out of frame. I had to set the stack down and stand at the sink until the tile cooled under my bare feet. We went to mediation before a retired judge on October 2. Tyler sat across from me in a tie. I'd bought him for his first real job. He wouldn't look at me. Mr. Larkin laid out the numbers, the recordings, the notary journal. Tyler's a dirty, sleek, quick, said words like family and intent to repay and emotional distress. The mediator was kind and useless. At one point, Tyler muttered, "This is a circus." And I said quietly, "The circus is because you set a tent over my life and invited carnies." The retired judge winced.
We didn't settle. So we set a hearing date for late October. It felt like the last lay-by on a road you never planned to drive. On the morning of the hearing, October 28, the courthouse smelled like dust and coffee filters. I wore the same navy skirt. Mr. Larkin wore a tie with tiny polka dots that made him look like he was going to do a magic trick. In a way, he was, turning grief into judgment. We called Amber first. She walked us through a baby shower like it was a battlefield, time-stamped photos at 2:05 p.m. with a pink banner and her thumb visible in the corner as she held her phone. A receipt from the Carriage House event rental. Her notary journal opened to March 23 with neat entries on either side and a blank line where my name would have been, if it had ever existed. The judge asked her a few questions about stamps and serial numbers, and she answered like a woman with a job she refuses to have dragged through mud. We played the recording from my Sunday dinner. Tyler's voice filled the courtroom. I had to put a date. I needed it more than you. I watched his shoulders stiffen as if he could outrun a voice already past tense.
Mr. Larkin put up a timeline on a board: bank withdrawals, cashier's checks, casino cage logs, player card activity. He drew lines between them with a marker that squeaked in the high-ceiling air. It was just paper, but it was also a net. Tyler's attorney tried to argue that I'd given him permission, that sons sometimes handle things for their aging mothers. Mr. Larkin pointed at the bank's letter acknowledging procedural deficiencies. He pointed at the notary's impossible date. He pointed at the casino's logs that showed the checks turned immediately into chips. Even if there'd been a conversation, which there was not, there is a line between helping and theft. Mr. Walker crossed it, then he wrote his name in the crossing. Don't click away. He'll get what's coming. When the judge ruled, his voice was level, like he was reading the weather report. He found that Tyler had forged a material part of a legal instrument and used it to convert funds for his own use. He entered judgment for me in the amount of $246,500 plus attorney's fees and interest. He ordered restitution as a condition of any plea if criminal charges followed. He signed a permanent injunction preventing Tyler from acting as my agent in any capacity. He ordered the immediate turnover and sale of the F-150 and the boat. He added language that allowed us to garnish wages and intercept tax refunds until the judgment was satisfied. It wasn't movie funder. It was better. It was a clear shape to a year of blur. The next month, the bank's settlement posted to my account. A sheriff's auction sold the truck and the boat, and after liens and fees, $58,400 came to me via a check that felt both heavy and light in my hand. The state AG's office sent me a letter in December that read like a sweater, warm, practical, outlining improvements Hawthorne had agreed to make to its POA procedures. Amber received a notice that her stolen stamp number would be retired, and she sent me a Christmas card with a photograph of a baby in a polka dot onesie and a note: "Thank you for fighting." January brought more quiet than I'd had in a long time. With Mr. Larkin's help, we set up a monthly garnishment from Tyler's new job at a warehouse on the north side. It wasn't much, but it was something. Regular. The IRS intercepted his refund in April, and the clerk at the counter where I deposited the treasury check smiled when I explained it aloud, as if to make it real. This is money my son is paying back because he is not allowed to keep what he took. Kelsey left Tyler in February for a while. She sent me pictures of a small apartment with a blue rug and no boat. In March, she sent me a text of a white chip with blue edges, a sobriety chip. She said, "He's going to meetings. They handed him 30 days and he cried." I texted back a heart, then set my phone down and made a pot of soup with carrots and celery and a piece of chicken so tender it fell apart under a spoon. In April, I got my roof fixed. I picked shingles the color of river rock and stood in the driveway watching the crew like a foreman in a skirt. When the rain came, it made a proper noise, a drumming, not a drip. I cried then, finally, in a dumb, grateful way, because water stayed where it belonged. By June, a year after the first wire, I'd recovered $214,000 between the bank settlement, the sale of Tyler's property, garnishments, and a lump sum Tyler's father-in-law paid to avoid seeing his grandchildren's college fund attached. That money went into a conservative CD ladder Mr. Larkin's friend at a title company explained to me over oatmeal cookies. I wrote down every maturity date and taped it inside my green binder. I saw Tyler only twice that summer. Once outside the church after a Wednesday night choir practice. He lingered behind the hedges like a boy afraid of a whistle. "Mom," he said, eyes too wet, "I wrote you a letter." He handed me an envelope with my name on it, ink smudged like he'd gripped it too hard. At home, I opened it over my kitchen sink. The letter said sorry the same way a small ship says it to a big ocean. He wrote, "You were right to make it legal." He wrote, "I wanted a big win to make Dad proud." He wrote, "I don't know how to stop wanting the next card." I put the letter in my receipt tin between the bank settlement letter and a recipe for lemon pie. The second time was in August at Kelsey's birthday. The family gathered in her sister's backyard with a Costco cake and mosquito lanterns. Tyler stood across the grass like a man who'd been lost in a big store and has finally found the right aisle. He didn't try to hug me. We talked about the weather and the hydrangeas, two safe, blooming topics. He said, "I'm working nights because the slots are quiet then." I nodded. We ate cake. That was enough. By September, I'd started a Thursday lunch at church for women who wanted to learn how to hold their money with both hands. We called it Receipts and Stories, and I brought my green binder and my tin and we laughed at ourselves, because God knows laughing is cheaper than therapy and sometimes more immediate. We talked about bank alerts and what a notary's journal looks like and how to say, "No, I need to think." We passed around fake documents and hunted for the way ink lies. We did not give legal advice. We told true things. When someone cried, we let her. When someone needed a ride to the county recorder, someone drove.
One chilly night, church ladies pressed apple slices into little bags, and I came home to a quiet kitchen. I set my cast iron on the stove and fried an egg, and the sound of it was the sound of a life that would go on making breakfast. I put the egg on toast and sat at the table under the clock Frank hung too high 20 years ago. I looked at my hydrangeas in the dark outside and tried to count the blossoms I could still see. I think about revenge sometimes. I think about how it's supposed to feel like a triumph, soaring music and all. What I have is plainer and better. I have a court order in a drawer, a roof that doesn't leak, and the steadiness that comes from knowing I did not let a lie rewrite my life. I have a son who is not welcome at my table until he has a year of meetings and a full year of garnishments paid and a letter from his sponsor that reads like a person, not a promise. I have limits for pie, if he ever gets there. If you are a woman who still keeps your good stapler in a drawer with rubber bands you've saved for years, hear me. Keep every receipt. Put important papers in a binder and write "important" on the front so even your future self knows. Ask for copies. If something smells off, say so out loud until someone else hears it. Accept help. Forgive later, maybe, but bind yourself to the truth first. And when it gets quiet, and you can hear the refrigerator hum like a train again, breathe. Make yourself an egg. Put a hymn under your breath. Look out at your hydrangeas. They will bloom next year because you made sure they could. This is my personal experience, shared for awareness and entertainment.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!